What is the truth in the stories we are told? We've been given a story of a world fueled by separation. We've become separate from one another, separate from the earth, ultimately separate from the true nature of ourselves. It's time we learn the truth. It's time you rewrite your story. It's time to realign with who it is that you really are. This is the fifth dimension.
You are infinite and eternal. We are infinite and eternal.
Our natural essence, we could say, is simply being.
We have this awakening coming together as a perfect storm.
We're ready for this. We have the capacity inside. We just got to find that.
All right, everybody, welcome into the Fifth Dimension podcast. Today, I am joined by former Muay Thai and kickboxing champion, Kevin Ross. Kevin, thanks for taking the time to come on the show, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. And I would love to start, just if anybody is maybe not familiar with you or your story, if you could give, a little bit of a background and sort of the journey you've been on, and also, I guess, where you find yourself now and what your evolution has been like and where your mission and purpose tends to be focused at.
Yeah, well, that's a lot to try to sum up. But yeah, as far as my fighting journey went, I didn't start training until I didn't get into a gym until I was almost 23. I always had a love for athletics and martial arts and boxing, and was always intrigued by those kinds of things, and had always thought about doing stuff like that, but never really saw anything that really piqued my interest. I mean, I was always very intrigued by like Taekwondo forms and stuff, but you never really saw any real fighting. And then, there was always the boxing element, which I loved, but there was something about the martial arts aspect that was always intriguing to me. And then one day I saw Muay Thai on TV at like 2 a.m. on ESPN. And I knew right away that was everything I had been looking for, everything I was hoping was out there, and I was just hooked from the first time I saw it. But I was only 14 at the time, and it was one of those things that was just kind of always in the back of my mind, like, oh, that'd be cool to try sometime. And anytime I'd see a fight or a movie with fighting, I was like, oh yeah, like Muay Thai. Like maybe I should get around to that one day. And it was just always there in the back of my mind. And but yeah, I didn't actually get started until almost 23. It was 2003 January when I first got into a gym, and then I turned 23 in July of that year, so right before my 23rd birthday. And then prior to that, I was struggling with alcohol addiction and stuff like that. I mean, growing up in Vegas, and that whole scene, was pretty toxic, particularly if you're inclined to that kind of lifestyle and stuff. So it was something I'd always put off, because I knew if I was going to do it, that I would have to really dedicate myself. And I didn't want to just kind of half-ass it, and I didn't want to give up that life. I didn't want to lose my friends. I didn't want to do something that was just so ridiculous. I never took myself seriously, so why would I even I had never even told anybody about that, but after a long series of events and bad things happening, and realizing that I needed to turn my life around, I just finally made that decision, made it my New Year's resolution going into 2003 to go after this. And I was in the gym the first week of January 2003, and then that went on for almost 20 years.
Wow, incredible!
Yeah, and I just had my retirement fight June. I think it was middle of June, a couple months ago.
Oh, congrats!
Yeah, so now I'm kind of into the next phase of not only my life, but my martial arts career and creative career and all that,
Right. Absolutely. And I love what I love about martial arts in particular. And I haven't done too much like stepping into the gym. I've gotten some boxing lessons, taken a few jujitsu lessons or something. Um, I find very attractive about it all over all other sports because it does seem almost more like an art form. And it does as opposed
Yeah.
to, like there's something pure artistry about it and a tremendous amount of self discipline that is required if you're going to commit to something like that. And something I haven't listened to some fair amount of like Joe Rogan talking to different martial artists, and he talks a lot about, I guess there's almost like a struggle for fighters to, I guess, let go of that. I mean, is that something that you're experiencing now, kind of finding that like focusing in on what the next chapter is going to be, like allowing, excuse me, yourself to sort of move into a new phase?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's been as big of a struggle for me as I can see as it's been for other people. I think from the beginning, I've always had a very healthy understanding of every day this can be over kind of thing,
Yeah.
So there was never that, like, this is who I am, this is all that I do. This is just my focus at the moment. And even in the martial arts aspect of it, fighting is just like this little piece,
Right.
And I think that's what differentiates certain things like Muay Thai, like Jiu-Jitsu. There's always the fighting competition aspect of it, but it becomes more about a lifestyle and just who you are as an individual. And I think that going along with what you said, I think that's what makes martial arts a truly beautiful thing, is the lifelong pursuit of growth and perfection. And it doesn't even have anything to do necessarily with getting in the ring. That's just one element of it. And that's just a small percentage of people that are even going to do that. So I think that's what makes it so attractive to a variety of people, is it's whatever you want it to be for you. It doesn't have this meaning in itself. Like, you give it meaning, and it can be therapy, it can be a religion, it can be a focus, it can be a fighting, it can be self-improvement. And I completely agree. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about not only martial arts, but any art, whether it's cooking or acrylics, things like that. Like, I think art, you can make art anything. It can be business, it can be podcasts, it can be anything you dedicate yourself to and are continually trying to learn, grow, and improve, not only in your art, but as an individual. I think is vitally important to life in general.
Right. Absolutely. And, part of where we're at collectively, it almost feels like we've, and I speak generally, obviously not for all individuals, because, we sit here talking about these things, but there's almost feels like a lost connection to that inner artist that lives within all of us. I used to be one of those people who would say, oh, I'm not creative in any form whatsoever. Right. And there's a lot of people who get stuck in sort of that, I guess, rational mind of viewing the world and the articulation, and not digging into that creative aspect within ourselves. And I think everybody does have that sort of creative juice within them. You just have to actually find the outlet. Like for you, not starting Muay Thai until you're 23, but since you were, I think you said 14, you always kind of knew that was something that would be almost a calling, something that you were very attracted to. And I think it's about taking that, I guess, a leap of faith, if you will, into the unknown.
It's very difficult to do, particularly when we live in a society and a world that doesn't encourage that in people. We're very much along this is the path you're supposed to take. This is the route to success. This is the way you go. And unfortunately, it's just like school, where school is like this baseline, everyone's going to get a certain amount of education, but it's also it diminishes a lot of creativity and doesn't encourage growing in other aspects where maybe school isn't for you, or that kind of structured school isn't for you. And it really it almost clips a lot of people's wings because of that. And then when you talk about trying to do something that's almost impossible or seemingly impossible, like being successful in a fringe field like fighting or music or art, you know, there's not a lot of people that encourage that exploration, you know, right. And that's why the ones who do pursue it and make it in those fields, they're the ones that are just so driven by that. But as you said, I think that we all have a certain calling and drive deep within us. And unfortunately, a lot of times we suppress that, and eventually it's going to come out in negative ways. Like for me, it came out in just my lifestyle and alcoholism and, you know, all these negative things, because you're trying to suppress this feeling of life in you. And you have this calling inside of you, almost it's like something is wrong here and I need to get rid of it. And as I said, I think that our society kind of puts that on people, and that's why everyone's self-medicating with drugs, alcohol, prescriptions, food. You know, your addiction can really be anything.
Right.
And I think that contributes to so much mental health problems, which is, I think, the biggest issue that the world really faces.
No, absolutely.
And we don't have a lot of outlets for people to explore what that is or why that is. But if you look around, you can kind of see why that is happening. And unfortunately, it's kind of gotten to a point now where it's just this monstrous machine where, like, if you don't go this way, you're completely ostracized from society.
Right. Absolutely. And I guess looking back, it's easy to see how that evolved into what it is. If that machine is going to continually grow and expand itself, you know, it's going to get to a point where it is ostracizing people who don't want to partake in it or have found meaning outside of it. And, you know, I come from a teaching background and worked in schools, and it's unfortunate because I think, you know, even a lot of the teachers who are in the schools, they're not going to be able, like, they want to demonstrate purpose and meaning and creativity for students, and they try and find ways to actually implement that. But a lot of the teachers themselves are self-medicating, or they themselves are not tapping into creative purposes, and they're not sort of gone on a self-explorative journey, like going inward. And so, you know, kids are going to model exactly what they see in the adults around them. So if you're not getting that type of example within schools in particular, or with parenting, you know, based on your upbringing, it's that student is going to have to find it themselves later on in life. They're not going to grow up thinking that's the way of like, what is the human's natural way of being. It's not at all what we've boxed ourselves into. It's something, I think, that what we're yearning for, that creativity, that life force energy, like that's what we're supposed to be living by. But that's not at all what our systems are designed on. And that's why we see all of the chaos and conformity and the push for obedience in certain aspects. And the more I'm myself, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like the last 18 months or so has been such a call for me to go deeper into this creative energy, deeper into myself, and actually, like, I feel more alive and energized right now than I ever have before, despite sort of the chaos and turmoil of the world. But it's because I'm recognizing the parts within myself that I always like suppressed or self-medicated or looked for coping for. And I don't know, have you felt that same sort of like rise within yourself, or like
well, it's really been an interesting thing for me, because I think from an early age I had a kind of a perspective on the world where it was some like, this isn't right, like, I don't like, some about this system is so against everything that I feel. And so for all of my life, really, I've always been kind of this sort of outcast person, to a degree, rebel, if you want to put it in those terms. And it's like the older I've got, the more I've understood, like, Oh yeah, you probably were good about that. And like now, especially over the last year and a half, there's so much coming to light, and so much people are coming to understand now, where to a degree I felt like I've understood that for most of my life, and I don't it takes me a minute to realize like this is a drastic awakening for people, where for myself it's like, yeah, well, what do you expect?
Yeah.
You didn't know these people were pieces of shit.
Right.
And it's, so I think it's important for all of us to have a little bit of empathy and understanding with it, no matter how much we understand or grow or have awakenings to, you might not have had that a year ago. And so you shouldn't be judging people who can't see what's going on and are so resistant to it. Or you're brought up in a world that encourages you not to question what's going on, not to look at things with an unbiased perspective. And I think we all need to just have a little bit of compassion and understanding for that aspect of it, along with trying to speak truth to people and encourage conversations, and know that there isn't one way to do anything. And just because even something that works for everybody, or the majority of people, it's not for everybody. And
Right.
if we're not, I think, communicating in that kind of a way where we talk from this is the only way to do it, and you have to do it, and you have to go along, and it becomes this, almost everything becomes a cult.
Right.
Whether it's politics, religion, even diet, anything, it can become, I like to say, like, the extreme side of everything is negative. And if there's no balance in there, because we're also unique, we're also different, and we're trying to find ways that are beneficial to everyone. Because I think the majority of people really do lie somewhere in the middle of all these extreme aspects. It's like you hear these terms, and like these extremes of people, but the extreme side is a very small percentage.
Right.
Most people are in more of a middle of the road kind of thing. So when you hear now with like what's going on in the world, you hear like anti-science, anti-vax. I've never met a person that was anti-science or anti-vax.
Right.
I've never met an extreme right wing or an extreme left wing person. I've met people that were kind of pushing that direction, but even that person was, like I can see points and aspects of this side that are important. And I think that is what's so important, because if you look at even like the political division, like even the political sides flip-flop over time. What they're saying today, like 10 years or 5 years from now, they might be on the other side of the spectrum. And if you solely align yourself with this side, this flag, that flag might change, and you're so committed to the flag that you're not looking at what's going on under there. So that's why conversation is so important, and having compassion and empathy for each other is so important, and being willing to understand that you're not always going to be right, even when it seems like you're right. It's good to at least converse with other people that are on that opposite side. And that's why I think travel is vital in people's upbringing, because you get so it's so easy to get stuck in this perspective of the world, of everything. And until you go to those other places, until you talk with another person, that's not, we look at everything else as wrong, and our views are right.
Right.
And again, that goes with everything, with all aspects of life. And then once you converse with someone who's maybe on that other side, you're like, oh, there's just another person. Their upbringing gave them this perspective, and there's a lot of good things there from their point of view. Maybe it's different than mine, but we're kind of looking at the same things, just from a different perspective. And the more conversations we can have, the more people we can meet, the better it is. But if you look at what's going on in the world today, we're silencing and censoring any conversation that isn't precisely what the narrative is right now. And that's a dangerous thing to be in, even for a positive thing. Like you could say, well, we can force everyone to be healthy. Like, I don't think that's a good thing, because who gets to decide what that is? And just because you say one thing that's healthy for one individual might be toxic for another person. Like there's, I don't think there's very many things in this world that you could say are beneficial for everyone.
Right. I would agree with that. And I think what pure freedom is that freedom of choice and the ability to open oneself up to the, I would say, understanding that there is going to be such a multitude of perspectives and ideas, and we can never know everything that is out there. We just have to seek to continually understand, and that another person who may be on the quote unquote other side, if you will, if we're picking sides and playing in that game, like their perspective is theirs because they had that set of upbringing, that set of conditions, that set of experiences that led them to that. And if you had been in that same exact scenario, there's a good chance you would have that same understanding and view upon the world.
And I think that is a big realization that all of us should have, really, is it's so easy for us to look at someone and judge them. But if you grew up the way they did and had the experiences they did and the parents they did and every other thing that they did, do you really think you'd be different than them? Probably not. So before you outcast someone as evil or wrong or the enemy or stupid, I think taking that into context, consideration, and perspective is important. It's hard to do, though. It's really hard to do, difficult, particularly in extreme situations. You know, where bad things are happening, violence is happening, wars are happening. It's hard to have that little bit of compassion for each other. And unfortunately, like most things, the difficult way is usually the better way.
Right.
But it's the hard way with everything, with health, with society in general, with education. Doing things difficult is not in our nature because we're inclined for survival, where we instinctually will go on the path of least resistance.
Right.
So a lot of these things that are going on in the world, we recognize that the majority of people will always go on the path of least resistance. So it's not about what's right or wrong. It's about just what the majority is doing. If the majority is doing something, the majority of people are going to go that way because it's just easier. And that's it. And you see how many people are using that rationalization for a lot of stuff right now. It's just easier. Like, how many people do you really think are going along because they think it's right or the way it should be? It's like the people that are really putting themselves on the line and putting themselves in danger are the ones that are really believing in what they're talking about. You know, the people that are just going along, or I just don't want to be hassled. I just want to keep my job. I just want to be safe. I just, whatever. The answer may be, and I think you got to understand that to a degree.
Right. No, absolutely. And it feels like, if anything, the systems that have been organized, and, you know, there's great things about having the ability, like a lot of us, we couldn't say 1,000 years ago, this many people would be middle class or have homes or have access to food. So there's a lot of good things that we've created, but it almost feels like there's been a hijacking of that nature of ours to keep us complacent within a system of comfort and seek the least resistance. And that makes people easily controllable. And, you know, in the times where we were maybe hunter or gatherers and we needed to face danger to survive, we would still take the path of least resistance, but there would be a time and a place where we actually had to face our fears, where we have to actually, you know, do what we need to do to be sovereign, like free, and really just survive, because that's what humanity was about. And so that's sort of our natural instinct. And now we've just seen everything skew towards that just least resistance side. And I think we need to maybe try and find a way to incorporate more of that wild nature within our systems or within our day-to-day life. And, you know, I'm not exactly sure how that would look on a large scale, but I mean, people are finding it in certain paths, you know, in fighting, like that's a way to put yourself on the line and go into this unknown territory. Right. And I think that's really if anything, been I guess the self-development aspect in that regard for me has been so deeply connected to my own purpose and how I'm going to contribute to the world. Like that's just
Yeah.
as important, because all I can do to help the world is really better myself in that regard and
Yeah.
detach from just the need for constant comfort.
Right. Yeah. I think it's like we tend to like demonize self-care and self-help as a selfish thing, whereas if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to express any of these positive things. So by you being better, you are going to be better for everyone around you. But it tends to be the reverse. We do it in an opposite kind of
Right.
way, and which only magnifies the negativity, because you're not taking care of yourself. You're not really taking care of the outside either. And then it's just all bad. It's kind of like the employee that's just doing enough to not get fired, and they're paying you just enough so you don't quit. That's not a good thing. That's good for a certain aspect of people. That's good for corporations, but eventually that just becomes this machine in itself, and they treat people like robots, and eventually they want people like robots, and we say, hey, look, you get this amount of food, you get this amount of money, you get to live in this place, and you don't get to be a person, you don't get to have an opinion, but we give you all this over here. And it's easy to point at that as the positive aspects about that, like, oh, everybody gets fed, everybody gets education, like, yeah, but there's still the point of life is to live, and the life doesn't come without risks, and life, if that is the case, that's not really life at all. That's just surviving,
Right.
And as I said before, that's there's a balance in all that, so it's not to say, oh, just like everyone should just say fuck it and go do whatever the hell they want and explore what they're feeling in the moment. But I think that's where we get into trouble with a lot of things. We can point to what's negative about this side, and we say, see, the other side has to be better because that's negative. Well, this side comes with bad things too. So unless we're being open about that and discussing what that is and having conversations and debates about what, why, and where all that is the case, then it's far too easy to demonize something else and say, this is why this is wrong, this is why this is dangerous, this is why this is safe. But everything comes with a cost, no matter what it is. So I think we forget that pretty easily, because we can say, see, look at these people getting sick, look at these people dying, look at these people falling and failing, and you don't want to do that because this is why you don't want to do that. Like, okay, yeah, but what comes with this? Not a lot of bad things too. You might be able to point to the good ones and distract people from the negative aspects of that, but it can be worse if we don't have that open, honest conversation that people are able to take those things into account when they're thinking about it and figuring out what it is they really do want and don't want.
Right. And I think that's the important question. Like, what do people want? And I don't think most people actually have even asked themselves that. What do they want? Like, who are they actually, beyond just the template that was given to them is as their conditions, right? That's
and like how much of that is our programming and the way we were brought up, and the way we had these systems of belief downloaded into our brains. Like, is that really what you believe, or is that what you were brought up to believe to make you think that was who you are and what you are? I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that's a question we should have about everything, and that's why I think it's important to question everything, because is it what you really think and who you really are, or is it only because of X, Y, and Z?
Right. Absolutely. And there were definitely ideas that I used to hold on to that I realized were not from a space of my own like internal foundation generating those ideas. It was just the programming. And I think everybody has that and is there. And like you and me both, we could probably openly say we still have blind spots to our programming. We still have areas that are, I guess, of unconscious awareness, but the growth path is that of commitment and discipline and responsibility to our our actions and what we're trying to do in this world. So,
Yeah,
eventually,
but I think once you accept that, it switches something in your brain. In you don't become so polarized to these different elements because you say, well, yeah, maybe. Everything's like, well, yeah, maybe.
right.
Maybe nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. Maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And being open to be wrong and to be hear other people, what they have to say. Now, those might not change what you feel, but at least you got to be open to the idea that everything could be wrong.
Right.
I mean, we could all literally be in a dream right now, and there's no way to prove that you're not. So I think that aspect alone, from my perspective, is like, you got to take everything with a grain of salt, because it's very easy to say, like, I know what's going on. I know what life is. I know what this is. Like, yeah, you don't know shit.
Right. No, exactly.
Like, from your perspective, like even with like, you talk about the scientific method, it's like, all it really is from the information that we have, from the way that we can study it, from the technology that we have, this is our best guess about what's going on right now from our perspective, because facts change, science changes, everything changes over time. What was real today wasn't real 100 years ago, and we forget that for some reason all the time. We think we know what's going on, but everybody of every generation thought the exact same thing. Like, they know what's going on, they know what's real, they know who's pulling the strings, they know who's behind the curtain.
Right.
Yeah, but nobody really knows.
It's almost like an ego thing to have that happen.
It's a huge ego thing. And it's I think it's a painful and a very difficult thing to admit that.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe what I thought was wrong.
Right. Right.
That's a hard thing to come to terms with.
Right. And I think there's a lot of the idea of what we're conditioned into believing is that being wrong is some sort of, like, it degrades the value of the self, or like there's
like
something,
you're a bad person.
Right. It's like, oh, if I have the wrong perspective, I am an inherently intolerable being and I don't deserve to be here anymore.
Well, I think that's what also limits our exploration of stuff, of ideas, of anything, because we don't, that aspect of not wanting to be wrong, that aspect of failure, we're conditioned to believe that failure is wrong, but there can't be growth without failure.
Right. No, definitely.
In anything, like, you have to, I always use lifting weights as a perfect example, because this can be applied to anything, but you can't not lift the next weight unless you fail at this one and break your body down, you build it back up, and you continually do that over time, and it's repetition and it's consistency, and it's figuring out ways that work and ways that don't work. And sometimes those things that don't work right now are going to work down the road, because you're going to change as a person, you're going to grow as a person, you're going to develop in all these different aspects. And I think that concept can be applied to everything, but we tend not to do that. Right. we tend to go along that path of least resistance, but the path of least resistance is doing nothing. And that in itself is degrading us, and we're receding and weakening ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all those ways. And it's life is about it's like this constant, like, growth is painful. Like, everything that's happened in the evolution of the world has been a struggle. Like, it's a struggle to grow, it's the struggle to be better, and it's tough. Definitely. And I think if we were a little more vocal about that, it would give people a little bit more of a perspective. That's why I've always tried to be vocal about my journey and the struggles that I faced along the way, and prior to kind of going into this avenue of fighting is the struggles that I face. It's very easy to look at certain individuals in the spotlight or as successful and think that they had things handed to them, that they had a certain gift, like, I think gift is a useless word. I don't think anybody has like this gift. They might have an aspect of this huge equation that they're gifted in, but that's not everything,
Right.
you know? And I think that talent in itself can be one of the more useless things in the world, because it tends to limit your growth in other avenues. And then eventually that collapses on itself. So if you have talent without discipline, it's going to crumble and fall. You know, more often than not, it's really just about having discipline, dedication, refusing to give up. Those are the people that make it. You know, I read a lot of autobiographies and biographies, and I think that's one of the which unifying elements of people that make it is they just refuse to quit.
Right. Resilience.
That really is it. You know, that really tends to be it. There isn't this magic thing that each of them had. Well, that is in itself a magical thing. Their dedication and commitment, and it's partly psychotic view of this thing that they want, because you kind of have to, because you're going to fail so many times. Everything on the outside is going to say that this is wrong. You're not going the right way.
Right.
We think there's going to be this roadmap, and this door is just going to open up and be like, oh, this is the path because this is easy. No, it's the one that looks like hell on earth to go down, and everything's wrong, and
right.
it's a really bad place, and you're probably going to die, and everyone you love is going to leave you. And unfortunately, that tends to be the right path.
Right. No, definitely. And that path of most resistance in that case is what's going to bring the most reward. I mean, I don't think you can actually, like, I think most people, when they're searching, like there's like almost a feeling of something's missing. Like if we're talking to somebody who lives by comfort, and, you know, that this could speak to me. And it's very hedonistic in a way. I didn't have too much like foundation of who I was. There was almost, it felt like something was missing, but I didn't even know the right like question to ask to discover what was actually missing from my life. And it was that, I guess, willingness to go down the most difficult path, to actually look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, I can overcome challenges. Like I was very much conditioned to shy away from the challenge, shy away from the struggles of the world, and sort of almost take a little me approach. Like, oh no, poor me. Like this happened to me. I'm going to feel like a victim for the rest of my life about it. Right. And it took a lot of, I guess, I would say ego death experiences to recognize the type of potential that lives within me. And because it lives within me, I know it lives within every other person. Like I'm not some special, unique, like Jesus type of, you know, figure. And you know, I know you'd say the same about yourself. There's a level of humility there, humbleness. So it's like, okay, how do we get people onto this path? Because based on where the times we're in right now, I feel like that is exactly the type of conversations we need to be having. That's the direction we need to be pushing people in. Like, get people to explore for themselves, about themselves, and what it is that they want to be. Like, not just do, but like, who do they want to be, and what do they want to embody, and like, how can they actually feel truly liberated, as opposed to just clinging to an ideology or a narrative or a negative belief about the self that they have, or, you know, their past, whatever it may be, and kind of decide to let that go and just open themselves up to the infinite possibilities that exist. And
yeah, for sure. I think that we need to have that honest look in the mirror about who we are, the things that we're doing that we know aren't contributing to this aspect of it. You know, one thing I like to tell people is, like, before you figure out what you want, you got to figure out what you don't want, because it's easy to start limiting what those things are, or instead of figuring out what will help you get there, figure out what's definitely not helping you get there, and start chopping those things off or limiting those things. And as you do that, this other path is going to slowly start to open itself up. It's not like somebody shows up with a sign that says, this is the way you should go and this is how you should do it. I think, as we said before, that instinctually it might be there, but you might not even know what that is. It's just like, it's almost a calling, like something is being suppressed. And we tend to suppress it even further because it's uncomfortable, so we want to bury it. Like, I don't want to feel this anymore. I don't know, we'll really know what it is, but let's just get it out of here. And we're just like pouring these layers and layers of suppression onto it. And it can take a really long time to uncover all that. And the only way to uncover that is what are the things that started to cover it up? What are we doing that's negative, whether it's diet, whether it's what we're watching, listening to, our lifestyle. And once we do that, this is all a journey. Like it's a long, painful, unending journey. And I think with the martial arts mentality of things is like, once you accept the fact that this journey can never end, because there is no end point, there is no perfection point, it frees you in a lot of ways. You're like, oh, I'm going to do this forever. Like, I can never get to a point where I'm just an expert at this. I'm a little farther along the path than you, but this path is infinite. Right. So time and space is irrelevant in that journey. I think for myself, that's something that's kept me very grounded in a sense of humility in the martial arts and fighting world, because I kind of saw that like there's no end. All I can really do is look at the people that have gotten to a certain point and like, well, that's a point you can get to, but they still have growth. They still have places to go. And once we accept that, I think that allows us to really view everyone like we're all on the same journey. We're all on the same path. Nobody is necessarily farther along or in a better place. They're just in a different place, but it's really the same place. It's just we're all trying to be better, hopefully trying to be better and improve. And in that aspect, we're on the same path. And I can look at you and talk to you in the same way that you can look at me and talk to me, because I feel that sense of we're all always going to be beginners, because there is no end.
Right. Absolutely. Ideally, everybody is looking to be better. And I think even people who, like, let's say, commit evil, like if I look at something like Nazi Germany, and I studied a lot of history, a lot of the people who just went along with it, those were like good people. Like they weren't.
Yeah, most people. And again, it's so easy to demonize everyone that went along with this, but you could really say that about everything. Like, how many of those people do you really believe in your heart were evil people? Right. They rationalized, they made exceptions. They might even have been doing the wrong things for the right reasons, whatever that is. And I would say that's the majority of people do that. Like we all make exceptions. We all rationalize. It becomes this slow regression into evil. Same thing going in the other direction. But to try to demonize a whole entire group of people where, maybe there was a couple of really evil people in there that this was their goal and they wanted to destroy the world or whatever. But it can be very easy to rationalize our way into just about anything. And before you know it, you're in this place. And that's why, nobody wants to admit and nobody wants to compare things to the past, because, oh, well, that's not what's going on. Like, that's not what's going on right now. But how do you think they got there?
Right.
And when you do study these things, and when you do look back on history and recognize that, like, we're always looking at the end of the road of a path. We don't ever look at the beginning. How did that even happen? And a lot of times that happened from a positive thing. Like, these people were suppressed. Now they're trying to fix that. But then the extreme side of that becomes suppressing another element of humanity. And it just becomes this unending cycle of victimhood. And then you're the victor, and now you're still their suppressor. Right. And that's why history seemingly tends to repeat itself, because we always think this time is different. We always think that we always look at the end result of something, not the beginning of the journey, how this path even happened, what was happening to these people prior to that happening. And unless we're able to be honest about that, we're always going to be able to say, this is different, this is different, this is different. And we're just going to be stuck in this forever until the world just implodes.
Right. It's the same cycle, the same like energy, the same roots that are grounded
Always,
in that.
always.
Right.
Like it's from day one. Like this, what's going on today is not new. It's not even that different. And a lot of the stuff that's going on around is the same people were doing this 40 years ago. They were still here. So something like we need to address what's this cycle that we're stuck in. We're on this merry-go-round. It's never going to end unless we start to change something. And I think a lot of that is that human element and being able to have conversations and explore these things and encourage people to learn and grow and to fail and to speak and to be okay with being wrong, be okay with having conversations, be open to discussions about things, because if not, we're just going to keep doing this forever, forever long this earth lasts.
Exactly. Well, I think the earth can only take so much of it herself.
Well,
so.
I'm sure we'll be out of here before the earth will be fine.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, that's what I always say too. It's like, if humanity goes extinct, I very much, the earth is a sentient being. That's the earth just saying like, oh, I had some little, I guess, problem I needed to get rid of.
That's again where the balance comes in, because we are visitors here to this earth, but we act as if we own this planet.
Right.
And we take what we want from it and just look around at what we've done to the world. And it's not the best thing, and there is a balance there. There you can look at really anything and be like, well, they were killing animals before, they were taken from the earth before. I'm like, yeah, but they were doing it on a much smaller scale,
right?
That allowed there to be birth and regrowth and life and death, and there was a cycle and a balance to everything. So like even in nature, you can point to aspects of that, but they're not on this massive global monstrous scale that doesn't allow there to be a cycle and a balance in it. And we are so far removed from what that should be. And it's unfortunate. I think it's hard for all of us to understand and accept. And, we want to keep going down this path because it's easier. It's comfortable.
Right.
It's nice to have things. It's nice to have money. It's nice to have a car. It's nice to have a house. It's nice to have property. It's nice to have a lot of this stuff. But eventually that's going to lead to all of our demise.
Right. No, absolutely. And I do think that the cycle that we're in, it's led to almost a lot of people, I would say, taking in this narrative that humanity, because of the destruction, like there's a lot of people who see the destruction, but then just still continue down this path of comfort, right? Because it's easier, because you take the nihilistic, oh, what does it matter then? But I think that stems maybe from this narrative that humanity in its essence is diseased or is destructive or is this force that is, malevolent in its nature. But I don't think that's the case. We have because if we look at like what is the true nature of the human being, like within myself, like I don't feel like I don't want to be destructive. I don't want to go out and destroy. I want to find harmonious ways of being between myself and my neighbors and create systems in that regard. And, it was just the unconsciousness, my own lack of awareness to my surroundings that created a destructive tendency. It wasn't, that story wasn't a real story unless I was acting like by it and unconsciously. Like I kind of internalized that and we unconsciously live by it. But as soon as you wake up to yourself a bit more, that whole narrative, I think, really falls apart. So I think we can find a way to live harmoniously on this planet with 7 billion people, but it's going to take a massive, like, cataclysmic shift in our awareness level and how we interact just in every single choice that we make, even because every single choice has an impact.
Right. Yeah. It's that's a difficult thing to do. I think conveying that we are all, how connected we all are. And like everyone is valuable and everyone has, it's like, it's this massive group mentality, and we're collectively shifting to a place that's not going to be good for humanity. I mean, inevitably humanity will go on and we're all going to be freaking robots. I mean, that's really where this ends up with the continuous growth of technology and information. I mean, just look how much has changed in 50 years, let alone 100 years or 200 years. It's rapidly progressing and speeding up. And within 100 years, we're all going to be some kind of robotic person. And I don't think that's what we really, I don't think anyone really wants that, but it becomes a matter, again, of convenience, of conformity, of, it's just easier, look at our technology now with our phones. It's like, I said this the other day, I'm like, last year's conspiracy is this year's rationalization. It's like last year, hey, they're spying on us, they're looking at our phones, and then this year it's like, yeah, well, I need to know where I'm going. I need them to track me so I don't get lost. And like, yeah, well, that's understandable, of course, but where does that lead? And it doesn't lead to a good place. And it's this slow progression or regression, however you want to look at it, we're not looking at the end of the road, because we're looking at right now, oh yeah, it's nice, and everyone's got a phone, and we have more information and communication than ever, and there's a lot of good aspects of that, but there's a lot of really, really bad ones too. And inevitably, without that accountability, I think, again, with all things, if you don't have someone kind of holding you accountable, you get lost. Yeah. Even if in your mind you're like, I'm doing the positive things, this is the right way. But if you don't have like a sounding board, someone like, yeah, maybe, well, yeah, but what about this? Or that's probably not the best way, or whatever. And we don't even, it's like, you don't even know what you believe or know unless you have somebody questioning what you believe and know. Like, how do you know what you know unless somebody's asking you and questioning you and pointing to some of your hypocrisies and contradictions and things like that. So yeah, it's like this global thing, but it really boils down to the individual and encouraging individual growth and accountability and where we're at in that spectrum. So it's so easy to point to people, like when it comes to wealth, it's so easy to point it to like these billionaires. We're like, oh, you guys could fix the whole freaking world. All you got to do is this. And be like, yeah, but what are you doing with the extra stuff you have? You're not giving it to your neighbor. You're not giving it to the people in the street. You're not living this minimalist lifestyle. We're always looking at people with more as the problem. And that happens all the way up the chain, from the poorest people in the world to even the people we look at as like these wealthy people that have too much. There's people beyond that we don't even know about, so everyone could say that about the people above them in that dynamic. And we don't hold ourselves, we hold other people more accountable than we hold ourselves.
Right. I was going to say, it takes that accountability out of it.
Yeah, we tend to judge other people by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. It's very easy to demonize someone by their actions. Like, you could demonize anyone in the world by their actions, but what was their motivation? People can do negative things for a positive reason, and vice versa. And if we're only ever viewing and judging the external of that, we don't even know what the reasons or rationale behind it was. And again, that's where I think conversations are so important. Like, where was this person coming from? And it's like, oh yeah, this person's coming from a really shitty place.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. But then, again, a lot of times it's like, I can see, even though it was really skewed and biased, I understand how they were looking at this, what view they were looking. And every single person on this planet's perspective and what they're looking at is different than every other person. Right. What it looks like to me is very different than what it looks like to you. But we assume that everyone's seeing the same thing. Right. And it's not even a little bit. I mean, I even like think about how our perspective of different colors could be so vastly different than the individual next to us. Like, we might call it the same thing, but what looks red to me might look purple to you, but we both call it red.
Right.
Because that's what you think red is. It's purple. But,
Right.
we never really think about that. You don't tend to think about that when you're going through your day. Like, everybody sees what I see. They're taking the same information I'm taking in. No, they're not. They're not even a little bit. Just in the way that we grow up changes our perspective of reality. Everybody's reality is vastly, uniquely different. But I think we tend to have this idea that we're all looking at the same thing.
Right.
And you're just a bad person because you're looking at this same thing that I'm looking at, and you think it's this thing, and I think it's that thing. And then we start judging each other, and then
we create stories based off of our perspective.
Creates a lot of problems, and unfortunately, a lot of that is, it's part of our survival mechanism is judging. Like, you have to judge in order to live. Like, I'm driving down the street, I see a car come at me, I'm judging how close this car is to me, what it looks like. You have to judge. Like, we all judge, but that judging is this spectrum.
Right.
It's not just judgment. Judgment in itself isn't bad. It's judging, coming to conclusions, and being stuck on those conclusions regardless of further information.
Right. It all comes back to intention and how we're using our perspective, how we're using our instinctual, methods of life, whether that be judgment, whether that be how we view reality, and are we going to be malleable and open? And, I think it's the world at large is really just a macrocosm for the individual state of awareness, right? So, we see a society that is judging one another and divisive, and that, that's just because there's a lot of majority of individuals who live that within themselves. They have the struggle within themselves. They're judging themselves. So if you're going to judge yourself, of course you're going to judge another person. So there needs to be that internal shift and switch the perception of how we view reality. Because, ultimately perception is what's going to create reality at the end of the day for each person. And if I'm living in a tumultuous chaos of my mind, I'm going to take that and embark it on the outer world. I'm going to give that to the outer world. And that's, and it's interesting because I look at something like social media though, and I often wonder, I notice social media is such an illusion compared to what is actually real life. I go outside and people generally where I am they're open. They're quite loving. I don't get bombarded for, let's say not wearing a mask, or people don't ask about others, what they're doing with their bodies. Everybody's just very chill. So it's only online where we're seeing all this divisiveness. And that gets back to, well, what are the majority of people actually thinking or doing? A lot of them are good people. So.
Yeah. Again, we talk about traveling and stuff. If you stay in this bubble, you can have a very skewed perception of reality. And as you said, over the last 2 months, I've been traveling all over the United States, and coming from LA, where it's very extreme, I feel like the coasts are this extreme ideology. And then as soon as you venture out a little bit, you're like, oh, all right, well, so this is what the news is showing. This is what they make you think is going on. And, but once you go out there and explore, the majority of the world or our world or this country is very different than what it makes it seem like is going on. And it's so easy to kind of structure people's outlook and belief of society and of certain groups of people by showing an extreme aspect of them. And again, if you don't ever explore that and find out what's real in that element, what's not, what percentage of that population is this way, we think, oh, well, they showed me what it is. That's what it has to be, because I'm seeing reality, right? And the more I think segregated we become and stuck in these bubbles and not going outside and staying in our homes and staying in our cubicles, it's very easy to manipulate people, and it's very easy to have a distorted view of reality because of that. And when you look at what's going on, it makes sense. Like, well, if you just go base your perceptions off of what you're told, and that's really with everything, whether it's the media, whether it's your boss, whether it's your parents, if all you're doing is taking what they say as factual, because you could be telling the truth and still not be telling the whole truth, and so it's very easy to say, well, this person was telling the truth. Like, yeah, but they left out 90% of the story. They left out the context. Right. If you facts without context are propaganda. It's just how we want to skew this perspective of an element of reality. But if we don't give the whole spectrum of the story, then we are just regurgitating propaganda, because it's just you're highlighting this one aspect of the truth, and it's very easy to convince ourselves that we're not lying, because we're not. We are telling the truth. And back to what I said before, is how many people do you really think are intentionally just being wrong or wicked or whatever? They're rationalizing an element of the truth that they want to convey to people because of X, Y, and Z. Because from my perspective, if I do this, then it'll be better for these people. And as long as I stay focused on that, I can't look at the destruction that's happening, the negative things that are happening. And and again, why it's so important for all of us to be held accountable. But what's increasingly happening in the world is no one's being held accountable, because every person that's resisting is being silenced. They're being censored. They're being imprisoned. Eventually, they're going to be killed. Like how did all these horrible things in humanity happen? That's how every single time. That's always been the process. That's always what's happened. And the majority of people have rationalized it along the way and went along with it. And then at the end of the day, maybe a small percentage of people are held accountable, but probably not. Most of the time, that doesn't really happen. And then we go back to the same cycle again and again and again and again. And like, we're never going to get out of this unless something drastically changes.
Right. And I often wonder if it's possible to have that change prior to some sort of cataclysmic downfall. Like, are people not going to see it until they've, let's say they become enslaved by this system? And I had I think you might be familiar with his Twitter, the Hard Hat Intellectual, on my podcast yesterday.
Yeah, he's great.
And he made a great point that, as long as we have our perception, we actually have hope, in the sense that, maybe they lock humanity down in the sense that we're so enslaved to our comforts, to whatever it may be. But that final locking, that final turn of the key, once we actually, once that happens and humanity hears that noise, maybe then they'll actually look inward and say, oh, how did we actually get here? What actually caused this? As opposed to just accepting, or then.
But that's the problem there. Usually that's too late.
Right. Exactly.
So we tend to not to make changes unless something really good or really bad happens.
Right.
Because prior to that, it takes a certain motivation and kind of awareness and accountability to look at what's going on. Because if it's not that extreme thing, if it's not that extreme success or that extreme failure, we tend not to look at what's right or wrong. If you fail, you can say, oh, well, this is what I did wrong. This is how I'm going to fix it. Usually failure is the best learning mechanism, unfortunately, because it's tough to do the exact same thing when you win. That's right. why failure encourages growth, because you're forced to dissect everything that you did right or wrong, everything you could have done, should have done, would have done. Maybe that would have helped, maybe not. And even in that, it's tough to really say what contributed to our successes and failures, because it's a broad spectrum of elements. It's not just, it tends not to be one thing, but we can usually look at the larger aspects of it. Like, I did this, and this was a big thing, and this made this big shift, and because of that big shift, I did all these other smaller shifts. But it's like, what is the big one? Yeah. And again, with what I said before about, you start cutting out those things that aren't contributing to that path, it it clears out what is helping and what isn't.
Right. Definitely. And it feels like the path of, in this case, least resistance and sort of conformity and following narratives blindly. There is no actual recognized failure when you choose that path. You're almost sort of rewarded for going on that path with your comforts, with the illusions. You know, you're handed a
Yeah,
cookie here and there.
We wonder why more people don't speak out. It's like, well, look what happens when you do speak out.
Right.
Everybody shits on you. You get fired. You get ostracized from society. We don't encourage people to be honest, and to be explorers, and to express their individual beliefs and perspectives, because when you do, you get stomped out. You don't get rewarded. Look at what we reward in society. Look who gets money. Look who gets paid. Look who gets fame. Look who gets recognition. It's very rarely these people that are actually doing good things for humanity. Right. They tend to be the ones that are assassinated, killed, live a life of poverty. And then again, we look and wonder why the world is the way that it is, but look at the things that we encourage and look at the things that we demonize.
Right. Definitely. And everybody has that within them, and it has to have that awakening to, what am I encouraging? What am I demonizing? What is, how am I welcoming each perspective with open arms, or am I fearing being wrong, fearing myself to the highest degree, right? Fearing that, I guess, death process of my ideologies and what I've wrapped my identity around, which is this system, which is comfort. And, I guess that's what we need, that death process in a way to take place for these people, so that they can, and death process in the sense of letting go of those ideas and those attachments, so we can, come together in a lot of ways and really unify. I feel like as long as I'm unified within myself, I can only spread that, and maybe there is some sort of domino effect. I mean, I don't know. I try not to project a story onto the future and leave people with rainbows and butterflies and be like, don't worry, we're gonna lock hands and we're gonna make it happen, because I don't know. I have no idea. But I feel like as long as I'm unified, I can at least go to sleep at the end of the night and be like, all right, I'm doing my part, and maybe we'll make this happen. But if not, doing my best.
I think what we all should do is, it's like that acceptance of the inevitable failure or destruction. Like, we're all going to die. There's nothing you can do about it. In the meantime, you can either make things better, you can make it worse. Like, there's no staying neutral really in anything. So you can say this fight that I'm in is impossible. Like, there's no way for me to win. So you can either lay down and die, or you can resist, and you can make this fight really difficult. So for me, in the actual fighting in the ring, that was always my perspective when I was going up against these guys who I really had no business being in there with on paper. Like, they might just destroy me in 1 second, but I have a choice to make. I can make this the most difficult, hellish thing on earth to you, or I can just accept the fact that you're better than me. There's no way for me to win. Maybe I just do enough to make it look like I'm fighting, but really I'm just trying not to die. But I think that acceptance of death, that acceptance of failure, which is eventually inevitable, it's, what are you going to do in the meantime? What are you going to do about it? You're going to make it easier, you're going to make it difficult. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times, because it does seem so hopeless, a lot of us just lay down and accept it and basically die. And I think you just got to make that mental shift and start to view things in that perspective, more of a life and death thing. If it is a life and death thing, am I going to speed it up or slow it down?
Right.
Absolutely. And what can I do? I might only be able to slow it down like this much, but it's better than speeding it up.
Absolutely.
And I think it's like, like in everything, it's just perspective. Have perspective. This might be a hopeless battle, but you're either going to help the battle go on, or you're going to give in and help the opposite side, or whatever, if you put it in those kinds of terms. And I think a lot of stuff in life, if you just put it in that kind of perspective, it makes things definitely not easier, but simpler in your mind and like more understandable. It's like it's either this or it's this. There's no kind of middle ground here. And I'm either speeding it up or slowing it down. I'm either helping it or I'm hurting it.
Right.
And what is it that I'm doing, and what is it that I really want in the end?
Right. Definitely. I like to think that battles that have been fought and won at greater odds than we're in now. So I think we're,
without question. Like
so
odds, like what are really odds? Odds are a guess of
right.
what
Exactly.
is going to happen. That's it.
Exactly.
Odds really don't mean anything in the law. And when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the things that have happened, the odds are none of us should be here anyway. So
exactly.
What does that tell you?
Exactly. What are the odds that all of the ancestors lined up as they did and had all of the direct actions that they did so that we are here in every choice we even made in our lives now to where we're here in this moment? Like it's all by chance in a sense, or destiny, however you want to view it, and fate in a way. And, as long as we stay connected and find, I'd say, that warrior within, that's what I always feel very empowered when I connect inward in that way and just recognize that, we're here for a reason. We chose to be here. Everything, if humanity wasn't ready to wake up and actually create this new system of change, I don't think we'd be presented with the opportunity for it. Right. And the fact that we can have, I'd say, a global level of awareness and awakening that I do believe is happening on a global scale because of some of the technologies that are happening.
Without question.
Like, I don't think we would be presented with the opportunity if we weren't ready to make the shift. So, I feel empowered in that regard.
I completely agree with you. And, I think there's a lot of aspects to like, oh, why does this have to be happening right now? Why am I alive during this time in humanity? But a lot of it, I feel very grateful for that, to be witness to this and to be an element in this, however big or small that may be. And it's pretty unique time to be alive, but really every time to be alive was unique. We can look at this and say this is unique, but 100 years ago was unique, 200 years ago was unique, 2,000 years ago was just as unique, just in a different way. Like everybody has struggles, everybody has battles, everybody has good and bad, and it's just a different time and different place. That's that story doesn't change. The story of human beings doesn't change. The elements change, and the earth changes and technology changes, but human beings have always been human beings.
Exactly. And what makes human beings and spirit and consciousness, that can never really change either. And that can never be killed, no matter how hard we try with our destructive unconsciousness. So there isn't a reason to feel hopeless about the true nature of the universe.
Well, it's almost like there's some things too, like when you see this progression of technology and these systems, like, well, inevitably I feel like they're going to collapse and fail, so maybe we should just speed it up instead of trying to slow it down.
Seriously, like it does almost feel like they do need to collapse.
Well, sometimes too, I feel like the more it speeds up, the more people are becoming aware of what is happening. So that's the question too, is do I want to, like, if it's going to go there eventually anyway, do I want to slow it down, or should we like let's get to it, let's get to the end of this and then see what happens?
Well, our speaking up about it and our actions to almost resist it maybe creates that opposite and equal effect where it speeds it up in the process because it's resisting the dissenting voices. And so it's, in a way, I do think it's all necessary in a way, the polarization of it all, the creation of it all, and how it's playing out. Because you're right. If the crazier it gets, the crazier these times gets, the more people who are going to have that moment of, okay, now I get it. Now I understand because I see how it's impacting me now. So, and I think there will be a point for most people where that hits. Hopefully it's not too late. Yeah. But, I guess we can really only wait and see.
That is
So,
true in all things. But yeah, I think just when you've seen the kind of progression over the last year and a half, 2 years of the conversations that are actually being had now, the people that are being vocal now about what is going on, as opposed to not that long ago, is it extreme. So
yeah,
I think on a global scale, these more and more things are coming to light, and more conversations are being had. Again, we get stuck in these polarized aspects of either this is all a big hoax or it's the worst thing ever.
right.
And you know, again, I think there's very few people that are on extreme sides of that, and there's a balance there, and we forget that both there can be right on both sides.
Right.
There can be correct aspects of both sides, and that's why conversations need to happen, instead of demonizing each other and justifying, criminalizing certain elements, because even if you feel like you're on the right side, once you start ostracizing the people on that other aspect, like, you just become the thing that you were fighting against.
Exactly.
We all become the enemy that we were fighting against. You will turn into that eventually. So that's why even positive things can lead to negativity if they're not kept in a balance.
Right. And that's why it's so important for that conscious awareness and not being attached to any side. I mean, my like goal and mission is to raise consciousness and create harmonious systems, but I'm not attached to what that actually looks like. Like, I'm open to ideas, I'm open to perspectives, and I recognize that humanity, like, if we're going to succeed, it's really a team game. Like, it's a collaborative effort. There's no one person above everybody else. So why would I sit on my high horse and pretend that I know everything and have all the ideas and be like, we need this way of living? Like, no, I'm just creating my own little tyrannical agenda over here, under the guise of harmonious and love and peace, when really it's another projection. So just got to stay malleable and open and flexible, and let it play out as it does, and work towards, because I think we all have the same goals, regardless of what side your people are on. People who are afraid of, let's say, a virus, they want to live healthily, happy, and free. The people who are shouting hoax, and they want to live healthy, happy, free. So, like, how do we combine that and that sight, that vision that we have, to create a harmonious way for all of us? And just going to work towards that.
It's an unending journey, and it's an unending battle, and it's I think if we look at all things in that way, that it'll be more beneficial to us all, that we're all just on a path. There is no set end zone here, or even that one thing. Like, it can be very skewed, and inevitably it can become negative in itself. So to be flexible and open and aware, it's in all things, I think is such a vital aspect of our balance with each other, with nature, with everything.
Definitely. No, I would agree, man. And it feels like nature is making a comeback in a lot of ways, despite all this despite all this technocracy and technology and us destroying it. I do think that the roars of nature are going to grow louder, in terms of, and whoever chooses to tap into that and recognize that and reconnect with that, like, that's, I guess, an individual choice. But I think nature will thrive regardless, and humanity, whatever comes of humanity, was
we got a
our
choice to make.
Our choice.
We got a choice to make.
Our choice.
I'm interested to see where this goes. See what happens.
Oh, 100%. So, I mean, awesome, man. We're at almost about an hour and a half. This has been a fantastic. I know, this has been a fantastic conversation. It just kind of flew by. So, I mean, is there anywhere you'd want to actually, like, send the listeners, if you have, I don't know, your website, if you have social media?
I don't know, man. My freaking I've been shadow banned on social media for like over 2 months now. So it's like, people think that I'm not even on there anymore.
Well, I was gonna say, I see your tweets. I don't know about Instagram. I haven't seen you on Instagram.
Yeah, so Instagram did for sure, about 2 months back. My engagement dropped like 1% of what it used to be.
Wow.
And yeah, it's frustrating, but it's whatever. I don't know if there's anything I can really do about it. I can always start a new page or whatever, but I mean, there's also something really nice about just being disconnected. Like, whatever. I don't want to be part of this shit.
I feel you. I feel you. My smartphone actually broke about a little less than a week ago, and I haven't gotten a new one, and I don't know if I'm gonna get a new one. I might just go with a flip phone for a while. Like if I go on social media, be on a computer.
It's funny how like once you kind of disconnect even for a moment from that, you're like, I don't know if I want to go back there.
Right.
And it's kind of nice. So it's like forcing yourself into isolation and then to get back into nature. When you go back in the world, the real world, as opposed to the digital world, it's you kind of remember your body and your soul remembers like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. We were lost and confused, and we had all these elements that we were focused on that had nothing to do with life. They only had to do with like technology and that kind of thing. But yeah, speaking of that, if you want to find social media, so it's both my Instagram and Twitter are Da Soul Assassin, DA Soul Assassin. I don't even know what my Facebook is, but yeah, I'm pretty easy to find on there if you want to look me up. Although, like I said, I'm pretty shadow banned, so I don't know if you can even find
Might
it.
not pop up in the search bar. I'll put it in the episode's show notes. I don't think they can. I don't think they can shadow ban my show notes or like take you to like if I put the link in there.
You're wrong.
Yeah, they
can do whatever the hell they want.
That's true. They own all these platforms. Surprised they haven't like shut down our ability to even like communicate in this type of format yet. But it's nice because like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they haven't removed it. They just let me keep posting truth, and I'm like, okay, that's great. I'm gonna go with it as long as I can. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad, man. So I hope you keep it up because this was great, and I think the conversations that you have, I'm sure, are all very, very much inclined with this. So yeah, keep it up, man.
No, I appreciate it, brother. And we'll have to reconnect in the future when things are a little further down the line, and
whatever that means.
See what happens.
Yeah,
awesome.
Sounds good, man.
Awesome. Now I'll have this out with in about a week or so, or around then, and I'll let you know. I'll share it to you, and
okay,
we can go from there.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, man.
No, I appreciate you coming on. It's been fun.
All right, you have a good one.
All right, you too, dude.